Hello, everyone. Welcome to our virtual event space. So, my name is Allie, and I'm your host for this evening. And I'm so excited to be introducing Linda Castillo and Chevy Stevens here to discuss their novels Fallen and Dark Roads. But before we get into the fun stuff, I just want to quickly thank you all so much for tuning in. As much as we miss having you all in the bookstore, it has been such a delight to expand this online program to connect readers and authors in a virtual space. So, thank you all so much for tuning in and buying books. Your support really is what makes all of this possible. So, I will be linking books in the chat all evening, so it'll be super easy to go find them. For those of you in the Seattle area, come on in. All of our 3 locations are open, or you can place an order online and come pick them up in the store. Or if you're not local, we do, of course, ship, and we are so, so grateful for your support. So while you're over on the website, I definitely encourage you to check out some of our other upcoming events. Oh, I'm seeing in chat that there's no video. Are other people able to see it? We had this issue yesterday as well. Here, let me turn this off. How's this? Am I appearing? I'm going to go ahead and keep talking. Let me know. Okay. Okay, so I'm seeing some no's and yeses. All right, let me just keep spamming this button. How are we doing? Okay. Hopefully, this should be working. Thanks for bearing with us for these technical difficulties. Okay, I'm seeing no video. So yesterday when this happened, this sorted itself out in just a couple of moments. So let's just make sure that this works. How about now? How are we doing? Wonderful. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and keep going with this housekeeping stuff. So once I put these links in chat, those will be links over to our website. Once you're over on the website, I definitely encourage you to check out some of our other upcoming events. We have an exciting roster coming up over the next few months, and if you'd like to stay in touch with our community, you can sign up for our newsletter. It's just a weekly update about events and exciting releases, our online book clubs, blog posts, etc. And of course, you can follow us on any of the major social media platforms. We are at Their Place Books for the quickest updates and recommendations. So we are here for about an hour, and towards the end, we will be taking questions. So if you have any questions, which I very much hope that you do, go ahead and leave those in the Q&A box, which should be either at the top or bottom of your screen. It is different than the chat box, which is great for virtual applause and connecting with each other. We would love to know where you're from or your favorite latest read, but when it comes time for questions, do make sure those end up in the Q&A so that they can be most easily found. I'd like to remind everyone of our commitment to ensuring the safety and well-being of event attendees and guest authors. So in our chat and question spaces, please do lead with kindness and refrain from any inappropriate behavior or harassment. And finally, there are some auto-generated closed captions available from the menu at the top or bottom of your screen. Go ahead and select the live transcript button to enable or disable them. And I believe that that is all of my housekeeping. So without further ado, I am so thrilled to introduce 2 wonderful thriller writers. First, we have Linda Castillo here to discuss Fallen, the 13th book in the New York Times bestselling Kate Burkholder series, which includes Sworn to Silence and Her Last Breath. The first book in the series, Sworn to Silence, was adapted into a Lifetime original movie titled An Amish Murder, starring Neve Campbell as Kate Burkholder. She has received numerous industry awards, including the Daphne du Maurier Award of Excellence, the Holt Medallion, and a nomination for the Rita. The second author joining us tonight is Chevy Stevens, author of 7 books, including Those Girls, Never Let You Go, and Still Missing, a New York Times bestseller and winner of the International Thriller Writers Award for Best First Novel. Her books have been published in more than 30 countries, and she's here tonight to discuss her new thriller, Dark Roads, which comes out in just a few days. So, thank you both so much for being here. I'm excited to be a fly on the wall for this conversation. If anybody needs anything, go ahead and give me a shout. It looks like the video issues have cleared up, so that is excellent news. And yeah, I think if you need anything, let me know. And I'm going to pass the stage off to our authors. So welcome, both of you.
All right. Thank you very much. Chevy, I have to say, what an honor it is to be here with you. I have been a Chevy Stevens fan since Still Missing. How many years ago was Still Missing?
Yeah, you and I were talking about the other day that you were one of the first to give me a blurb for Still Missing, and it meant a lot, of course, because that was my debut. So knowing that anybody else was reading it and enjoying it was huge at that time. But that would have been before 2010 because it was launched in 2010. So it was probably 2009.
Yeah, you just sort of exploded onto the scene with that book. I loved every word of it, and I've been a fan ever since.
Thank you. And that's when Sworn to Silence.
Yeah, Sworn to Silence.
That was, I remember, because my editor was like, we need her. She's so great. She's doing really wonderful. And then I was starting to read your books after that too. So.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk to you about Fallen first. What's neat, the only time I've ever met you in person was at the Hotel Valley Ho, and then we walked over to the Poison Pen, and I got to see you interview other people, but I wasn't able to, of course, ask you questions. So that's really exciting. It was nice to read an actual hardcover, like a real book. I forgot how now we read, I get everything on my Kindle. So it was like, wow, what is this foreign thing here that you can turn? So, and I read it in a couple of days. It was really exciting. And that's something that I wanted to ask you about. Like, it is your 13th book, but it felt really fresh. It didn't it still felt new. And like your descriptions, the scenery, the Amish community. And I wonder, like, if after 13 books in one setting, I would be like, there was some barns, but like, how do you keep it fresh for yourself?
I think that's as a writer of a series, and this is a series that's been going on for 13 books now, which is incredibly hard for me to believe as an author. I think a lot of that boils down to character growth. And when I started writing the series, Kate Burkholder, of course, is formerly Amish.
Yes.
And she found her way into law enforcement and became the chief of police in a small town, Ohio, in the heart of Amish country. And she, in the course of that first investigation that took place in Sworn to Silence, she met John Tomasetti, who is an agent with the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation. If you look at those two characters in that first book, they were not at a good place in their lives, and they were pretty much sort of damaged souls. Tomasetti had just lost his wife and children, and Kate Burkholder had a very personal connection to that first case. And in terms of keeping the series fresh, where I'm going with all of this is that so much growth has taken place over the course of those 13 books. And I think that's, I've learned things about Kate Burkholder and John Tomasetti that I didn't know when I started the first book. And, I've gotten to know the characters really well, and they've just absolutely grown in a good way. I mean, they're both, very flawed characters. I love flawed characters. One of the things I love most about flawed characters is there's so much room for personal growth. And I think that's a big part of it. And probably another part of it is, the whole murder mystery and the plotting aspect. I had a very astute reader email me just the other day. It was actually about the book that was out last summer titled Outsider. And she pointed out that Outsider was not a murder mystery. It was a thriller. And most of these books are murder mysteries. And so I think that may be, part of how I've been able to maintain that freshness. And it's not an easy thing to do, as I'm sure you know.
I literally wrote, I think that was one of my things. I'm like, this was thrilling. Like often murder mysteries, you start with your crime and it's very investigative. And when I've attempted to do my own books, if I start with an old case or something that's happened, I tend to just lose all speed. But somehow you kept it very tense and thrilling. Like there was some intensely scary scenes in there. And, being a writer, so I think sometimes we can get a little harder to scare maybe, but I was like, no, that's scary. That worked. And it was very tense all the way along. And, I think one of those things is that you did, which I really appreciate, is we actually get a look into the other characters, but we don't know who's talking sometimes.
Yeah.
So that was a really nice way of keeping that tension going, but it was very much there all through. Of course, because we still knew that person was bad and out there. But,
it's actually pretty difficult to do. I mean, if you look at not necessarily the latest book, but Outsider, which was out last summer, you never want to cheat the reader. You never want to use a device that is unfair to the reader, because the reader has a mystery. The reader wants to solve the mystery. And one of our jobs as a mystery writer is we have to give them the clues. And so, it was, a very, conscious decision that I made to have a couple of points of view where we weren't going to know exactly who the character was, who the speaker was. And I think in that particular book, it really worked, and it added an element to the book that added a lot to the mystery.
I think it was very effective, and it wasn't confusing. I think sometimes when somebody goes into a different perspective and you're like, who is this and where is this? It felt very natural to the storyline. And it wasn't, sometimes it can be so vague that you're like, I don't know who's talking, or, because the author's trying to hold so much back, but it was enough that it could be maybe a few people that you put out. So that was good. And so do you intend to have a twist though? Because you still want your answer to be a surprise, right?
Yeah.
Or
the twist, sometimes that is just so, as you must know, it is such a mind-bending thing. Yes. And it really requires us to, sometimes we have to really think outside the box. And we have to know our characters. We have to know how they would react. We have to know all of their motivations and their goals and their conflicts. And I mean, Kate Burkholder, John Tomasetti, but we also have to very intimately know our villains.
Their motivation.
Yes, we have to know their motivations. And, sometimes we're dealing with ambiguous characters. And I think that is, that's one of the keys to being able to sort of pull that off.
Yeah. Well, because the one thing about books is we generally do need to justify why our bad person did the bad thing.
Yeah.
We want to believe it. But unfortunately, in real life, there's a lot of people who do bad things just because they wanted to do the bad thing. But
you never get away with that.
Yeah, he felt like it.
That would never happen in real life.
No, he wanted to. Just doesn't seem to really fly quite the same on the page. But so all 13 of your books, they've all been Amish, in the Amish community, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, and I read a interview that you did on that and how you were drawn to that community because it seemed very idyllic and picturesque, and so you thought that would be a really good place to put a few murders. Says every writer ever. This place looks nice. I'm gonna wreck it. What could possibly go wrong here? Let me see.
I have to tell you that, of course, I grew up in Ohio, and I have, I actually grew up in the western part of the state, which is, Midwestern farm country.
Yeah.
Most of the Amish are in the northeastern part of the state, and it was sort of a happenstance visit that I took Chevy, I don't know if you know this about me, but I began my career in romance.
I do
Okay.
know that about you, and I love that
Yeah.
about you because I'm a diehard romance girl. So.
Yes, I wrote romantic suspense. I have to backtrack just a little bit. I'll tell you the story of that. So I was in a very unusual position as a writer, where I was writing for two publishers at the same time. I was writing for Harlequin, and then I was also writing for Berkeley. And it was great. It was early in my career. I was very excited to be doing that, and I was writing romantic suspense at the time. And of course, when you finish a novel, you package that baby up and you email it to your editor. Your editor reads it. They give you feedback about the novel. You make a few changes, whatever it is you agree with. So I'm writing for both of these publishing houses. I had Kim and I had Cindy. Those were my editors. So I would finish my manuscript and I would send them off lovingly to my editors. And one of the things that I realized toward the end of those few years that I was writing romance is I was getting very similar feedback from my editors. And they were basically telling me, Linda, these are romance novels. You need to concentrate on the relationship between the hero and the heroine. And what they were basically telling me is that I needed to stop killing people. And at that point,
nothing kills romance more than
that totally kills the romance.
When we say body count, that's not what it is.
So, and that was the point when, although, I enjoyed writing those books, I really learned a lot. I learned a lot about the business. I learned how to write, how to structure a novel.
And
I
how to
realized
write
that it was,
under deadline.
I was really writing the wrong genre. And so at that point, I decided that I wanted to write a breakout novel. And my first love had always been, murder mysteries, thrillers, sort of in a little bit of a darker area. And so I was, I love to plot. I would say that plotting is probably one of my strong points. And I was able to come up with
Clearly, if you can plot out 13 books that don't trip on each other. Yeah.
I was able to come up with what I believe was a high concept plot. But I knew that in order for this book to truly become a breakout book, that it was going to have to be something special.
Right.
And I knew that if I turned it in as it wasn't going to fly. And so I took this happenstance trip to Ohio. It was actually Fredericktown, Ohio, which is a teeny tiny little town, with my brother-in-law and my sister. And, he grew up in a 200-year-old farmhouse. So we spent a weekend visiting with family. We were getting ready to leave. There's like 10 inches of snow on the ground. It's like 20 below zero. And I'm standing in the front yard as we're saying our goodbyes. And I hear the clip clop of shod hooves coming down the road. And I turned and I looked and I saw an Amish buggy, black buggy coming down the road, gentleman clad, flat brimmed hat, his family sort of bundled up in the rear. And at that moment, I knew that if I were to take this high concept storyline that I had conceived over the last few months, as I'm trying to, come up with this brilliant idea that I've had in mind, if I were to set that among the Amish, there were so many elements of that culture that fit with that storyline that was the moment that I decided to set this series among them.
Well, it was a brilliant choice, obviously, for you. Who knows if anybody else could have done it as well, but you've really done it. It's rich, the setting, it's a look into a lot of lives that we don't see. I mean, I live on a Vancouver Island, Canada. Amish are very far away. Your book is the closest I've gotten, right? So it's an interesting look, and how just how rich is and of course also it makes it more interesting when we see Kate to interact and still to honor that community and work within that community it makes her job harder, which as a murder, as a mystery is always excellent. The more problems, the better. And she just has that connection as well, because she grew up Amish, right? Like
yes. Yeah.
Right. And in this book, you have a connection with Rachael, the other main character, that they both left the community. I was
Right.
wondering if it's almost like how, family systems theory. It's interesting that they both left, but they both went in two different ways. Kate became law and the other one, not so much.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
was that intentional? Did you want to parallel that, or did that just happen?
Chevy, that is such a good question. And if you look at both of those characters, Kate Burkholder knew Rachael Schwartz growing up. Rachael Schwartz, by the way, was the victim early on in the book.
Yes, I wasn't sure if I was
Also sort of a character in this book also, because we learned a lot about this character. And
it felt very real, sort of, but like she felt really real. It was not that she was all off camera. She feels alive, even.
Right.
Yeah.
She was actually, even though she was the victim in the beginning of the book, she played a role in the book, sort of telling her story, everything that led up to her murder. But one of the things I loved about that the most is that there were parallels between Kate Burkholder and Rachael Schwartz. And I think Kate had the tools to deal with, leaving the Amish way and sort of starting over in Columbus, Ohio. She basically went down, the right road. And if talking about dark roads, Rachael Schwartz sort of went down, she went down the wrong road, and she was a very flawed character.
Yes.
And that's,
and it's her flaws that connected Kate, a personal connection to the crime, and it meant that much more to her, because I imagine at some point she'd almost be, that could have been me.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. There were definite parallels there. And, Kate thought in the course of this investigation, Rachael Schwartz was not a perfect individual. Nobody is.
Yeah.
And she made some very bad decisions, but she did not deserve what happened to her. And so I think because of that, and because of these parallels between them, Kate knew her. She knew Rachael when she was a young girl. She babysat for her. She was very driven to find out what happened to this young woman, what happened to this pistol of a girl that I knew when she was just a kid. And
so, and I think that's what makes your book special too, is because we feel that emotional connection. It's not just a person who's introduced at the beginning and then we're going to see that person solve. Through Kate's eyes, we saw why this person mattered, all, flaws and not, and, her whole picture. And I think that's what makes these work so well, that extra layer. But I was curious, obviously it's become a very long series, but did you intend that when you started? Did you think, well, I want this to keep going? Or was that a really good thing that happened?
I didn't know when that first book, when I wrote that first book, that was probably the book of my heart. I wrote it by pretty much, I'm a plotter, and I wrote that book pretty much by I plotted it. And yet I wrote by the seat of my pants. It was sort of a combination of those two things. And I think that story, I'd sort of been holding back for so many years writing.
I can finally kill genre.
But I really, I just sort of let it all pour out with that first book. And I didn't know where it was going to go. I didn't know how it would be received. If you look at most Amish books, a lot of them, they have sort of an inspirational message, which is fine. Some of the Amish books, they're more of a cozy mystery. And these books these stories that I'm drawn to, they're really more hard edged. I mean, they've got some hard edges to them. They're dark, which I love. And so that
dark, but not gratuitous.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And that's one of the things that really drove me into this series, that made me want to continue the series.
So you obviously intend for it to keep going. You have more.
I do.
Do you? I like that, you talked about the romance, and I like that you can work those in there. There is romantic aspects, do you have a time lapse? Like, do we know how many is it 13 years in Kate's world, or has it been like a really bad year?
You know, I do have a timeline. I sort of keep what we call, you know, a Bible of the series. And I think, you know, this is probably the place where a reader really needs to be able to suspend their disbelief, because there's no way so many high profile cases would happen in small town Ohio. There's just no way. But
Worst
you know,
town to live ever. Yeah.
I mean, it would be I'm going to eventually I will run out of people to kill, right? Because your population is only about 5,300. So, you know, some of the books are 3 months apart. You know, I like the different seasons in Ohio. You know, if you've read the books, you know that I love those brutal Ohio winters.
Yeah, well, it's so atmospheric too.
The rainy springs. And you know, there's no place more beautiful on earth than Ohio in the summertime. And so, you know, I like to show all of the seasons. And sort of that's how I measure my passage of time, is sort of
where you're going to set the next, like what season the next one will be in.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So you must be already, you write a book a year, so you must be already done your next one then.
I am very close to finishing. Yes. Yeah. Good question. Very writerly question, by the way.
So are you a person who's superstitious? Like you don't like to announce the chat, like anything about it until you're done?
No,
or
I'm not superstitious at all. We actually already have a title, which is hidden. And to the best of my knowledge, of course, the release date could always change, but as of now, it'll be released in July of 2022.
Nice. That's good. So I was going to, one thing I wanted to ask you about was the police stuff. I noticed that you did a ton of, like, you went and took classes and everything, right?
I did. Yeah.
So are you basically like a cop now? Like, could you?
I wouldn't go that far. I'm so not brave enough to be a cop, but I have to tell you, you know, I love police procedurals. I'm like a huge John Sanford, Lucas Davenport.
McCain. Do you ever read a lot of Ed McCain? Yeah.
Yeah. And I went through do you guys have citizens police academies in your town or in a bigger
I don't think the RCMP does that. I don't think.
I am telling you, it was a 12-week course. Everybody met once a week, 3 hours for that night.
12 weeks?
Seems like, yeah, 3 hours. It was very much a classroom setting, but it was put on by a Sergeant McGilligan. And I am telling you, the guy could have done stand up. He was so funny. And, you know, they had different departments come in. I mean, we had everybody from patrol to canine to homicide, crimes against persons.
Wow.
And, you know, the guys would just come in and basically talk and tell stories. And we also had field trips. I got to go to the coroner, the morgue. And we got to do shoot, no shoot scenarios, which was very interesting. But, you know, in terms of writing from a police perspective, it was really, really helpful.
Were you intimidated? I always think I'd be intimidated. Like, I've written about police, but usually my people are on the other side of all that, being chased or trying to get, you know, something.
Yeah.
But I always feel like I love that. Same as you. I grew up, you know, I used to read Ekman Bain till, you know, I knew every single 87th Precinct novel and I love them, but I was a bit intimidated to write. Just
yeah. I mean, you never want to get it wrong. And
No.
one of the things I've learned about cops is, you know, I've met, you know, several cops over the years. And they, you know, they love to help. They love to help writers. They like to talk. They like to tell stories. And, you know, in terms of research for the books, it's been really helpful.
So you probably keep having to research, like each one would bring up a new question, right? Like you probably still keep in touch with certain people.
Always. I mean, there's always something. There's always a lot of things that I just don't know.
Right.
And, you know, there are some things, you know, especially if it's an important piece of the book, when you have to get the police procedural element right.
Yeah.
So it's
I would imagine you watching Law and Order going, that's not how they do it. Like, I'm wondering if you know more than, you know, you're like, no. Like, you must be pretty good at it.
Well, I have to tell you, you kept me up until 3 o'clock in the morning last night.
Not a good thing. Yeah.
And I have to thank you for that. Dark Roads is fabulous. I mean, I've been a fan, as I mentioned earlier, since Still Missing. And this book has so many elements that I absolutely love. There is, what's the release date is August 3rd, by the way. Is that correct?
Tuesday.
There's a survival aspect. There is a murder mystery going on, and it is an absolute thrill ride from the very first page.
Thank you. That means
And so enjoying that very much. And I wanted to ask you about how did you put all of those elements together to make such magic? I mean, how did you just do it as a writer? I mean, what's your take on that? How did you?
I wish I could say it was intentional, but I generally find if I get the right scenario, the right people, and it took me a long time to get that. That's why it's been a long time since I put a book out. And it's not that I was spending so many years on this particular story. It's that I spent 2 years on wrong stories. With me, it was the old mysteries and then not being able to keep that heat going. And,
Right.
Just over and over, couldn't get past those first 100 pages. It would just fizzle. And then, thousands conversation with my editor about how we could maybe, excite it up. And frankly, if you have to keep doing that it's just not there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had discussed with her something that's always very frightened me and upset me in BC is that we have this highway, this tragic highway that was very upsetting history. And of just how it would feel if a family member of yours, if something had happened to them. And the initial premise was a girl who wanted revenge. I think, I don't know if I mentioned this, but who would want to hitchhike on this highway. But then it ran out of steam very quickly when I had a girl just continually hitchhiking and going around and around trying to find the bad guy, and it wasn't the bad guy. So, it evolves. That girl was Beth. Then, in subsequent conversations with my editor, decided we needed another girl, like somebody who had escaped, and then that involved. And this all timed with the Me Too movement was really coming out, and we were angry. A lot of women, we were really mad, and I wanted to lean into that whole women don't wear short shorts, women shouldn't party, and Vaughn was a really good person to sit. Vaughn is the cop, Hailey's uncle, who she's forced to go live with. So I needed her vulnerable, who's more vulnerable than teenagers. I had this image. It was one of the very first images that came to mind. The springboard was this young girl sitting in the car with her uncle, and I needed him to be in a position of authority because, again, he was more, these, whether it be the Harvey Weinstein, all these guys. She was young, she was vulnerable. And I had him warning her, but in that way of looking at her jeans shorts and how short they were. And what girl hasn't had that?
Felt that at some point in your life. You feel it and it's,
and it's done with the guise of, protecting you.
But not
a threat. So it was a way to explore that. And then, I knew I wanted her to have, I also like the concept of somebody using this location as a way to disappear, as a way for her to protect herself. Young people don't have limited options. So then I, of course, had to give her a background so that she was able to live in the woods. She steadily got better and better and better at it, because it's like, you're not gonna make it. So by the end of it, done with her, she was pretty strong survivalist.
I have to tell you, her name is Hailey.
Yes,
and I love her. She's a 17-year-old girl. Just lost her. She lost her mom years ago. And then she just recently lost her dad in a car accident. She is courageous. She is smart, but she's also very vulnerable. What inspired you to write Hailey?
I don't know if she was inspiration or just I mean, a lot of this just is, from instinct, like, that they just sort of come together that way. I knew I wanted to give her a best friend. I really
Yeah.
wanted to have a male, female, that best
Oh,
friend, the best friends that you can have. It might
yeah.
be that a lot of the romance books I love, they always have they can often have the best friend that lives next door. In romance books, typically they'll grow up married or friends to lovers, or one joins the mafia.
Yeah.
But in this, like, I wanted her to have that loyal best friend. And I also knew she would need help, because if she was going to run away, I needed her to have somebody.
Yeah.
But I liked that she had heart, and she loved, and she cared, but she was stuck in a really bad situation. And I love nature, so I wanted to.
Yes, I can tell. I mean,
Yeah.
it absolutely shines through the
Yeah.
book. I have to ask you, we've been in touch. We've only met once, but we've corresponded a few times over the years.
Mhm.
First time I talked to you, I knew about Annie.
Yes.
Your
My
Annie
first dog.
was sort of a lab mix.
She was a lab
So,
pit bull. Yeah.
oh, really?
Mhm.
I'm an animal lover. I know you are too, and I have to ask you about Wolf. I don't think we're giving anything away by
No,
talking
Wolf right
about
now is
Wolf.
potentially the most popular character I've ever created. I had no idea that after 7 books he'd be my legacy. But I was saying to my one boss, I said, I need to do like a prequel, like Wolf Origins. Like, just who was he before Dark Roads?
Yeah.
But I so even people who maybe aren't big fans of the book, they'll always end it with, but really love that dog. For Wolf.
We love animals. And I
Yes.
think Hailey needed him.
Yeah.
He
And
had
it's
Johnny, who was so
that I recognized. Sorry,
yeah,
but when I
yes,
had Annie, that was when I was single. And your friends, you feel very alone. I lost my dad when I was younger, and Annie was my best friend. We would hike together. We do everything.
yeah,
They're familiar, like
yeah,
you're not like your witch with your cat. They're your sidekick in all my
yeah,
favorite movies.
yeah,
They're the person with their dog, and they're always man and animal against,
yeah,
plus I wanted to have somebody up there. That would be darn lonely. And
yeah.
I also needed to interact for us to show what her life was there. And it becomes pretty boring if it's just one character. So I wanted to show it throughout her animal,
Oh,
and
yeah.
he went through some evolutions too. One draft, he had a lot of italicized thoughts, but they were a little bit more internet speak dog. And it's
Yeah.
just not, it really kills a thriller when you have the dogs like, ICANN has snackums, or, like it didn't work. He got less
Yeah.
cool, but he
Well,
evolved.
your final draft was just, I
Thank you.
mean, what a great character. I mean, he's a minor character, but he's a powerful minor character. I
Yeah.
love that.
Well, the thing is too, should we clarify, he's not actually a wolf, he's a dog, but
Yes,
he
yes.
calls him wolf. But
Like
I
a
know
border
it's like the
collie
first
mix.
border collie ever. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I knew I
And,
needed to be a border collie because they're phenomenally smart.
they are absolutely. I had a border collie lab mix, and she was extraordinarily, so she was scary smart.
They are.
One
Yeah.
of the themes that I sort of saw in the book, Hailey may have only been 17 years old, but she was, she's strong.
Mhm.
She was facing some pretty terrifying things. And Beth is driven. Beth is flawed.
Yeah.
And do these they're both strong women. They're young women, but they're strong women. Do you base any of that on women that you've known or people that you've known in your lifetime, or did they just sort of come to you as
Yeah.
you were in the book?
Yes, and they grow it, like who they are when I first started writing them is typically Beth. When I first started writing her was an older character. And then I was having a really hard time justifying why she was living in her car and doing
Yeah.
all these things as an older person. It
Yeah.
made her, young people are vulnerable. Young people make mistakes. They get
Yeah,
messy. They
me
don't
too.
know how to cope with their emotions yet. I
Yeah.
lost my dad at 22, and I know that none of my friends knew how to help me with it
Yeah.
because they didn't know what that was like. And
Yeah.
also for Beth, not only did her sister become a victim, but she became a victim one of the victims. And I think when you have a family member who's not just honored on their own, but now they're become part of this historical thing, it takes away from that. And so she was really struggling, she's very struggling. And I have her as the lost character. I wouldn't say, I'm probably an aspect of all these people too. Like, I can imagine how you could be that way. And Beth is strong in a different way in that she just doesn't know what she wants to do or be anymore. And she's just lost, in a perfect world, sure, all our characters would do all the right things and she would have gone to therapy right away and worked through that, but no, she got in her car and drove up north and saw a cute boy named Johnny and, figured some
she's
stuff out.
driven. And I think sometimes those flawed characters have a really important role to play. And I think they are so much more interesting. And I think people, that makes them also, to me, a little bit more relatable because, all of us
people
are
that they walk the edge, she's on the edge, she's dancing the edge. Like she could go that way. She's not coping with her grief very well. She's drinking and, doing all these, she's walking that line and, and it will make her stronger. And,
one of
she's
the
healing
other
a lot.
that really struck me about the book that I loved. I'm like you, I'm a huge lover of nature.
Yeah.
Your scenes, much of the book takes place. I actually have gone out to Google Earth and looked at that area because I was so absolutely intrigued. I should have been writing today instead, not. And it plays such a central role. Did you, how much travel did you have to go to an area that was close, or did you go to that area, or how did you
I didn't go to that specific area because the last year I was writing that book was pandemic. And I had thought maybe we would do a road trip and go up there, but then that all happened and I was like, well, no. As you know, you can do a lot online, but the terrain is very similar to BC. I have traveled through British Columbia. I live on an island. As soon as you go up into the mountains or off the grid, there's still so much of BC is still remote. There's a lot of it remote, and it's a dangerous area, not only because of the highway, but to this day still, there's just such big stretches without people. There's not a camera on every corner. There's small police groups, it's where a lot of bad things happen. And that's why I took one small area of this and I created, what would it be like to grow up on the edge of something so awful? And because there's just so much of that still, BC is very wild, it's very untamed. It's the small town, Cold Creek is a conglomeration of a lot of little small towns in BC. And I think even US, US is familiar with small towns, But I don't know if people understand just how rugged it is and how you could be, in theory, maybe only an hour or two away and nobody could find you. You can be that far up there.
And there's no help if you get into trouble.
And that's why I did need her to have a friend in town, because I did want like a 17-year-old. I thought, I don't, I need her to have somebody to contact.
It was really so well done, Chevy, and absolutely brilliant the way you wrote all of that.
And I think also I was getting everything's domestic suspense, which is really great. But personally, I was wanting to go in a bit more of an adventure thriller vibe. I wanted that. I wanted something different.
And
so
it really
I enjoyed it.
It's just it's so worked. I totally love that aspect. It's so unusual, and you just blend all three of those, the mystery, thriller, and survival story aspects. You blended those so well, and just absolutely a riveting read.
Thank you. I appreciate that a lot.
And are we
got time for questions?
Are we should we?
Hi. Hello, I'm back. And we do have a few questions.
Sure.
I'm going to just take this moment very quickly to say, audience members, if you have any questions, now is the time to throw those into the Q&A box. We would always love to hear from you. So our first question here is from Shannon and says, "Hi, Linda. I'm in Iowa and live about 20 minutes outside of an Amish community, and I know a lot about their customs and practices. I'm just curious if you have an in with an Amish community for your research, or is your knowledge through written resources?"
You know, it's actually both. That's a fantastic question. And it's actually through both. I travel to Ohio every summer when I go on book tour, and I always try to build in a little bit of time to spend in Amish country. And one of my librarian friends, Denise, who I love, has introduced me to a couple of Amish families, and I've been lucky enough to be able to have dinner with them and tour their farms. And I actually even got to drive one of the buggies once, which was very, very interesting. So a little bit of both. And I have to tell you, I know a lot more now about the Amish than when I first started writing the series.
Thank you for that question and, of course, answer. We have another question here that says, "Chevy, your books, I believe, are all standalones. Have you considered a series, or do you prefer the standalone, and why or why not?"
I have considered a series. There's been a couple characters from some of, it's not so much that the main characters would continue, generally because they've gone through a lot. I think it would be like really cruel to keep their, I mean, my books have to be so fast, and so they would just be terrible to do one to one person. But I have thought of continuing with one character and doing something. But typically I'm a little bit, you know, by the time I'm done with a book, I'm a little tired of that world. I want a new challenge. I want to create something new. My first 3 books are standalone, but they are linked. There is a therapist in the first, and the same therapist is in the second, and then the third book is actually her story. And since then, they've been all standalones. I have kept myself a little list of characters from different books that I would like to maybe pull out and have a story for them, but it just hasn't happened. It just, nothing's come up. But I really do love police procedurals myself. I enjoy reading them. But
Very cool. Very fun. So I have a few questions. Audience members, if you think of anything, go ahead and throw those in Q&A. But in the meantime, I get you all to myself. So I love to ask this question of writers. What was, for each of you, what was your best day writing this book, and what was your hardest day?
I can go first. My best day, I actually remember it, which, you know, that probably doesn't always happen. But there was a scene in the book that, you know, writing to me is such a, it's a difficult endeavor. And I'm one of those writers who I don't like usually what I first write. I'm not happy with it. And there was one scene that I wrote with this book. I believe it was, gosh, I can't even recall exactly what scene, but when the writing flows for me, that's always a good day. Sometimes, you know, writing is like pulling teeth without anesthesia. And that's how painful it is to get the words on the page. And then even if you do get the words on the page, they're not right. And so my general rule is, you know, I write the book wrong the first time, and then I write it the second time correctly. And there were a few scenes in this book where I wrote them right the first time, and that's always a good day.
Good answer.
That's a great answer. I agree. Those times are far and few between. Professionally, one of the most exciting days for me, almost really honestly more than publication day, is when my editor tells me that it's almost not even the last final done, but the there's usually the first editorial where you still you know, you got a lot ahead of you. But then there's the one right after that where she's like, okay, we're in that final lap. And then after that, it's just a great feeling, because usually, especially with me having spent 2 years on books I ended up throwing out, for that first big period of time, I felt good about what I was writing, but there's always that fear of like, I could be horribly wrong. And when I hand this in, she might say, no, this isn't it. And then I'm going to have to get another job. But so that fear is always there. So when you hear, no, this is it, we are close, this is that is just it's like an endorphin rush. And I can write 12-hour days after that, because it's fiddling and I feel confident. I'm not second guessing everything. I'm just honing it all. So that is a fabulous feeling. And then the two scenes that I probably love the most or felt the most connected to in my own, that came easy, is one scene where Hailey is with her girlfriend, Amber, at a beach. And it was just, I just really loved it. It was very pure and young and sweet. And it came, like Linda said, some come almost word perfect, and then all you're doing after is just a little fussing. Other ones, you could just, you don't even recognize it. You've done it so many times. And then the last one for me was my epilogue. It came out very strong and like felt powerful within me. I didn't have to dredge up the feelings, they were there. And so those two were really good feelings to write. Worst days are probably when you're hearing that something's not working, or you get I think I've just blocked those ones out. So
oh yeah, we don't need those, we don't want those.
They were the 2 years.
Yeah.
A lot of days.
So I have a question here from Jennifer. Jennifer from Michigan says, do both of you plan on doing book tours in the future?
Well, I'll go first. I would love to. Whenever the booksellers and librarians are ready, whenever readers feel comfortable going into stores, I will be there. I can tell you that I traveled to Ohio in the past every fall for the Buckeye Book Fair. It's in Worcester, Ohio, which is not too far from where Kate and Tomasetti live, but it's going to be in person this year. And, so far all systems go. So I'm planning to be there, and it's going to be my first in-person event since tour of 2019.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
Me, I'm not sure. I mean, imagine that, yes, at some point when the world opens up again and we all feel comfortable and safe, that will happen again. Being up in Canada and on the island, it was always a little bit harder for me to get to a lot of those places. Sometimes I could only see I would be gone for 2 weeks, but I might have only had 5 events. So it's just a farther stretch for me, but certainly I enjoy meeting fans and getting out there. I've become so introverted in the last year and a half. I might have to, go through a reconditioning to get back. I might have to just like drive by some airports and like sit outside and just hear the planes a little bit or something. It's going to be an adjustment, but yeah, I think all of us miss being able to connect with our fans in like real life.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Jennifer, we miss having authors and readers in the stores for events too. So hopefully soon, hopefully, yes. So I have a question here from Sally that says, Linda, I'm from Sydney, Ohio. Currently living in the Seattle area. Your books make me homesick. I love how you incorporate Pennsylvania Dutch. Was that hard to do?
That is such a good question. Pennsylvania Dutch, there's not a whole lot written down on the language. That's the kind of language, I think they call it High German, that is passed from one generation to the next. And I have been lucky enough to find my librarian friend in Ohio, actually, Denise, was able to give me a couple of books, a couple of dictionaries, English to Dutch and then Dutch to English. And I use that. I think I have 2 dictionaries. Sometimes they match up, sometimes not quite. I have a very difficult time conjugating verbs. Interestingly, I was at an event in Ann Arbor, Michigan a few years ago, and there was a couple in the audience from Germany, and they were telling me that they had just been to Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and they could, the Amish that they talked to could understand their German, and yet they could not understand Deutsch, the German that the Amish spoke, which I thought was a very interesting point. But I'm glad you enjoy that edition. I think it adds an authenticity, and I enjoy that aspect of the Amish culture very much.
Mm-hmm. I like how you layered in. It's always just, it's perfect. Like, it's not so much. It just really, it does make it so much more legitimate and real. And
Thank you. Thank you.
So we are getting about to the end of our evening. So I'm going to ask just a couple of more questions. If anybody has any, now is the time, last chance, folks. So my last question is, are there any books right now that you just want to absolutely scream about? Not including the ones we've discussed.
Sorry.
Or maybe including them.
Lisa Unger. I'm also a big fan of Lisa Unger. Confessions on the 745. I think that's the title. I hope I got that right.
That's her new one, I think, right?
She's fabulous. And then also Sarah Stewart Taylor. I'm about to read hers. And also one other one, Jess Montgomery. She's an Ohio girl, and she's got a series.
Called The Stills?
The Stills, yes.
Title.
It's sort of set in it's historical, set in during Prohibition, Ohio, and her character is a female sheriff, which is just really, really, really interesting. So those are great.
For me, I don't read as much of our own genre as people think I do. And I think that's because I do have a young daughter at home. She's only 8. So when I'm done working, we typically hang out and we do fun things or light things. And I don't even really watch much TV anymore. So by the time I do go to bed and I have a little bit of reading, that's not usually where my mind goes. Somebody I've been reading a bit more of, because she does some really good historical stuff, and I've been contemplating in the future putting my next book, currently my next book, I'm setting it in the 70s, and I love nostalgia, and so I've been reading Taylor Jenkins Reid's, I think, if I'm saying that right, Malibu Rising is her current one, but she also did Daisy and the Six.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah. And I really like her style, and so I will sometimes read people just because I'm trying to savor, their word choices, and just, to learn from them, really. I read people to admire and to learn, and also because it's just different than our genre, but I really think she's a beautiful writer. So she's my current crush, my book crush.
Okay, well, I just wrote down the name, so I'll check it out.
Yeah, she's really good.
Yeah, they're good. They're very good.
Right. And they can be so slow. That's fine. I mean, they're slow, but they're interesting. If I described pages like that, my editor would be like, what are you doing? Like, get them in the car.
We need a body.
Yeah, nobody's died yet. But in those books, you're like, oh, that's just gorgeous. It's just different.
Okay. Sounds good. I'll check it out for sure.
Yeah,
they're good. Oh, okay. So we have one more question.
Yeah, and I have one for Linda if we had a minute.
Yeah, by all means.
All
right. So this is from Julie, and says, "Hi Chevy. I just moved from Port Alberni. I hope that I said that okay. But I've been reading your books for several years. I love your writing and appreciate your detailed settings, which helped me know more about BC. I hope you will travel to our new bookstore where I've pre-ordered your book." Thank you, Julie. And so I think, go ahead, Chevy.
Did I miss a question, or was that just?
I didn't see a question. I think it was just a very sweet comment.
Oh, thank you. I was like, did I glitch? What? Did I miss something? So my question for Linda, somebody asked me this once, and I thought it was really interesting. If you weren't writing in the genre that you are writing in, is there any other genre that you think would be fun, or that you would try just for yourself, or,
Oh yeah. You know what I think would be fun in a fictional way to write? I've always wanted to write a post-apocalyptic novel.
Well, now's the time.
Yes, now would be a really good time. I just read, it's been a few years. Gosh, I think his name is William Fortune, One Second After. And it was a post-apocalyptic novel that happened after an electromagnetic pulse, took out the grid.
Yeah.
And very, very, really just entertaining, fun, harrowing read. And
I feel like
so
somehow you could work that into the Amish. I feel like,
yeah, I mean, they would not miss electricity, that's for sure.
I think they might be okay.
Yeah, they might be okay. They're not going to miss the lack of gas or fuel.
Yeah, they've got buggies.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. That's not what I would have guessed for you. So that's interesting.
What about you?
Me, I love fantasy. I really do. And but being a child, that was always what I predominantly read. That, and then, then I went through my crime spree, but it was always, fantasy was a huge thing. And then through my daughter, again, rediscovering that love of that. And, I think too, because you're not contained to your world. You don't have to, is it Canada? Is it US? Is it, it's wherever. So
your own worlds, build your own, basically. Yeah.
So I have some, I have some background ideas that I, when I'm bored or procrastinate, I make lists of concepts or images or books. And so they're all tucked away, but that I would like to try my hand at some fantasy for sure. And they can use a different voice than we use in our language. They can be more storytelly, or they can have more of that rise. I could see myself doing some YA or middle grade.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good.
Maybe some romance rolled in there.
That is such a good question. I'm going to steal it.
I've had somebody ask me, and I just love that, because it's often, as writers, we do well in our genre, and that's, the path, but there is other things we wouldn't mind experimenting with, right? So I find it's
for sure
fun to hear what people like to do.
So I
Thank you, everybody.
I think that we are reaching the end of our evening. So I'm just going to take one more moment to say thank you for both to our authors and to our audience who has been here and having a good time. We so appreciate you showing up. For all of you who would like to get your hands on copies of Fallen or Dark Roads, I am just going to very quickly post the links one more time so you don't have to go searching through this chat. So there are those. Go ahead and follow those links over to our website. Of course, if you are local, come on in. Let us know what you thought of this event. Or if you're not local, tell us on social media. We always love to hear from you. Chevy and Linda, one more huge thank you for being here. It has been such a pleasure.
Very, very much. Chevy, thank you. Thank you for writing a lovely book.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Maybe we'll be on tour together one day, or at least in the same city again.
I would love that.
Maybe down in Seattle.
I'll be there. Thank you.
Can't wait.
All right,
All right, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.